history is often not revered until it's 20 years plus. So, and I just, I really just did that. And I realized, like, as I got older, and I was like, damn, I'm glad I did that, like, and plus when people pass, you're like, oh, no one in the world thought Margaret Kilgallen would die at 32, and she's gone. And I have this beautiful 16 millimeter. I went to Japan with her 2 times, and I have this piece of film that is so precious to me. And Dash, like, who the hell thinks this kid is going to die? He's in his 20s, And I got down an ample amount of footage of him, and then he's gone. So it's a way to, I always think that artworks have a life. Someone puts a life force into creating something. And, when you leave, the things you make stay here and live on, and you are in those things. And so, I kind of, not that I'm in my archive, I guess I'm in my archive, but I'm just like, why, artworks and I just think there's a life force. And when it comes to, actually, I just made a short film about memory, about what you're saying about the art of documentary. And I think it's an art form. And it's not just, right now everyone has this phone in their hands and they shoot the shit out of everything. But that's one part of it. But there's a huge part about caretaking in that archive, like a garden. You can't just throw some seeds, and, like, you have to take care of it. You have to know where it is, have to know where to find it. You have to, if you throw things on hard drives die out, like, you have to caretake that. And then someday you use it to say something, and, like, when it came to the Dash film, it was rewarding to me to be able to tell that story with mostly my footage. Not only my footage of him and his artwork, but also my footage of New York City at the time. And I lived down in the Financial, really close to City Hall. And it was, it was the epicenter of protests. And at 90s, Giuliani's, corruption was coming to light, and his police brutality. And I filmed a lot of protests down there, and on video cameras. And so when I was trying to tell that story about New York for younger people and other people who thought that guy was like the mayor of the world, I'm like, no, that guy's always been a piece of shit. We all knew he was a piece of shit. Here's some evidence he was a piece of shit. And in the 90s, this is, I made this film for a British guy, and he's like, what is this? And I'm like, well, let me tell you, so that's rewarding.
When you're living these moments, are you aware that, like, while you're shooting these photos, are you aware that this is a significant moment as the person who's documenting it? Is there what's it called? It's like there's purpose behind it, and you do recognize and do appreciate the moment. I often talk to people who have lived through the same era, early 2000s, New York City, the art scene, the graffiti scene, and all the amazing people that were part of it, and just affected culture the world over. And a lot of them are like, no, I was just, living.
Exactly. No, I would say, like, I think, if you're going to a scene and you're like approaching photography like it's a job, that's not going to, those pictures look like a job. That's, if you're going to a scene because you're going to support your friend's show and you're going to a dance party, whatever, and your camera is just an extension of your hand. It's just like, I never not have a camera in my hand, and I don't think about it. It's just part of who I am. And, sometimes I don't want to carry that. I just carry small cameras or Leicas, whatever, but, you're participating. You're inside something. You're not outside looking into something. And that's the difference between having a feeling for a document and having it be, a news picture. I don't know, having it be from someone from the outside that just sees surface, right? If you're in it, you know what's inside, and that's what you're responding to, and that's what you're capturing, hopefully, And yes, I think like documenting photography it's kind of like fishing. You're like, oh, I caught dinner, okay, but you don't think about it, and then and now maybe you're posting stuff on Instagram, but it's sort of like did it. I remember the pictures that I didn't capture for whatever reason. I fucked up my gear. I chickened out. I always have this quote in my head from Jill Freedman. And, for anyone out there who doesn't know who she is, she was one of the best, most incredible street photographers. She's passed, but she made a couple of very incredible body of works. One is Street Cops and one is Firemen. And Street Cops, she, late 70s into the 80s, Lower East Side, up in the Bronx. She rode with the cops. I said to her, like, you were like one of the first people to embed. She's like, don't use that fucking word. I hate that word. I'm like, okay. She rode for years. She rode with the cops. And she's like, yeah, it was gnarly. I mean, she's got like pictures of like a dead body that hung himself in the Bowery, Bowery Hotel that had been there for a while, like, and she was just like, I saw some gnarly shit, but I would tell myself, I'm here to do this. I'm here to do the job. Shut the fuck up and do the job. Take the picture. Take the goddamn picture. So when I see something, I ride a bike in New York. That's mostly how I get around. So sometimes you're seeing things and they're flying by you, right? And you're like, oh man, that was sick. But it's like, oh, I'm going to stop the bike and put the bike somewhere, go try to take that picture. And I hear Jill say, take the goddamn picture. Just take the goddamn picture. So I know I'm not going to get what I saw, but I have often gone back, checked the bike, and tried to get that picture, even if it was a shitty picture. But I wasn't lazy, and I think, that you can control.
Yeah. What do you feel looking back at your archive, looking back at these photos from the past and people who are no longer with us, or times and just complete eras that are not the same anymore?
I wish I took more pictures of the street early. When I was a photo assistant. I was traveling all over the world, so I was popping in and out of New York, even though I was living here since, when I was being a photographer, I would say 85. And I lived in the East Village, and it was like the crack epidemic, and I have like here and there, but I wasn't thinking about street. I was thinking about other documentary projects. Like I shot boxing for 10 years and how to get in magazines, how to make a living being a photographer. So, I wish I was more, I wish I was just doing more street photography.
Why is that?
Just because, yeah, I mean, those streets they'll never be like that. I mean, the East Village, and look at Martha Cooper's work, I mean, what she captured in the 70s and 70s and 80s into the 80s was like a world that anybody coming to New York now wouldn't even fucking believe existed. So
it's because of the changing nature of that you wish you captured it more.
Yeah, like, things are so ephemera. They're so fleeting, and time moves really fast, and things change really fast. And particularly this city, it's such a transient city. It's so, the economy dips, rich people leave, the World Trade Center falls down. The whole, like, the streetscape changes, then all the developers come in, the money change, like all these big buildings go up, all of a sudden it looks different. And then the pandemic happens, and we have Black Lives Matter, and they break all the windows, and everything's looted, and it looks completely different. But then it gets fixed up and turned into something else. So it's such a, like, evolving, it just changes constantly. I know people that lived in New York, or they'll like come back. I haven't been in New York in like 6 months. I don't even know where anything is. I'm like, it changes that fast.
Yeah.
So, which is, it's fascinating. It's an organism, it's a living organism.
Yeah. Do you dislike the change?
Uh, with like the bad things comes good things, you know. Like people, I hate when people say, "Oh, New York is so over," you know. It's so it's this and that, as if like no other city isn't the same things are happening. But then you're like, go take the J train on Friday night, and there are these kids. They don't give a shit about Manhattan. They're like doing their thing out in Bushwick, out in Bed-Stuy, out in Queens. You know, like having the best time, having their New York. You know, they don't care what the 70s were like. You know, only the people that had a taste of it do. You know, so um, it's always cool to somebody. You know, and
Yeah.
it's cool for me to see people making their own New York, you know.
I talked to Clayton Patterson maybe a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, and he brought up the fact that it was a place where, because of the low rent, people could come here and, in a way, experiment and get
Mm-hmm.
into different things and practice their art, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Because you didn't have that, I guess, financial pressure to bust your ass 24/7. You had some time on your hands. With that time, you could do shit. How do you feel the picture of that is today?
Yeah, it's a travesty. And you know, the reason why developers want to co-opt a neighborhood is because artists went there and made it cool. But if artists can't afford to live in the city, then it becomes just like a beige mall, like the rest of America. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to have some preservation. I remember going on. My friend she's on MSNBC, and she invited me to her show um, when I made Everybody Street, and she's like, it was coming out, it was premiering in Los Angeles. She's like, want to be on the show, talk about it? I'm like, okay, but I wasn't in the studio in New York City. I had to go to some weird remote studio and be in front of a green screen of like the skyscrapers and not physically even. I was in a black room. So I'm talking to her, and then she, I guess as a sidebar, then she was like, and then also here is a couple other people. And but I had no social cues of like how to talk because I didn't. So basically I just busted out, like we talked about my film for 2 seconds, and then other people were talking, and I was just like, I just want to say one thing. I think de Blasio had just got in maybe, and I was just like, New York City has landmark preservation, but what they don't have is cultural preservation, and it's completely bullshit that CBGB's is a John Varvatos store, and that's what de Blasio needs to do. I mean, this is, you know, it's how can artists need to afford to live in this city, because that's what makes New York what it is, you know. And then they were like, okay, let's go to a commercial. But I got to say that on TV.
Yeah. How do you make that happen? How do you make it so that they preserve and see the value in something like CBGBs, or see the value in something like the Brooklyn Banks, or, you know, Tompkins was going to go a few years ago. And when I saw the news on that, I was like, I saw that, you know, Adam Zoo was doing the thing to protect it and stuff and save it. And I did not think it was going to work, to be honest with you, just because I'm like, what does the city give a shit about some skateboarders and the history of here and the artists and stuff like that? If they want to make some more money and they want to make some more changes, and they're going to do that, and the dollar takes precedence to that. But, you know, luckily I was wrong. How do you do that?
I guess it. I guess it has to start from the grassroots level. Like nothing can happen in neighborhoods unless community boards
Yeah.
okay it. And if you've ever been to a community board meeting, it's complete like craziness. But you know, I know that, you know, to just open up the Mercer Hotel in the East Village, like had to jump through a lot of hoops, you know. And so there is a voice if people actually put energy into doing that. But or you know, there are local elected officials, like, or you appeal to um you know, I remember I lived on 7th between C and D, and you know, all those community gardens in the East Village are there because they were empty lots, and they were empty lots because landlords burnt their buildings down in the 70s to get insurance money. So there was just like big piles of rubble. And then this community just said, hey, man, we want to make gardens. And they they got permission, I guess, got them
Mhm.
from the city. I'm sure every garden has a different set of dynamics, but I live next to the most expensive real estate in the East Village, this building called the Flower Box, and behind us was a beautiful garden, and the city was going to take it back. And Bette Midler and some other Broadway people got behind it because and fought City Hall basically and got like a 10-year reprieve from Bloomberg at the time. But they just voiced and went bananas, and they made it. Something changed or didn't change.
Yeah.
So I don't really know the answer to that, and it's it's bureaucracy, it's government, but the way that federal government is going, I don't know what the hell's going to go on, but yeah, I don't know.
What was New York like in the early 2000s for you?
Um, it was cool till it wasn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I was incredibly affected because my studio was a half a block from the World Trade Center.
Mm.
So, um, I have a crazy ass story, and it's long, but uh, I, you know, I ran out, whatever. It's a big story, but it was probably initially. It was kind of like the most community loving first 2 weeks of my New York City life. Like everyone, I'm a freelance person. Everyone, you're like all fighting for the same jobs and like so competitive, and you're just trying to survive in this town. But like after 9/11, you'd walk down the street, and even if you saw someone you were slightly acquainted with, they were like, "Oh my God, you're alive! I'm alive! How you doing?" Like come and hug and cry, and then we'd have like 4-hour lunches with friends because there's nothing else to do, and I then just I really made it. It was fascinating to me, the evolution of human behavior.
Mm.
My street, Maiden Lane, was like kind of the in between the two footprints of the Trade Center, and like one of the pieces of the building was like kind of halfway up Cortlandt Street. Not halfway. It was like felt like it was halfway up Cortlandt, unless it wasn't. But it was really visible and became like a viewing place for people. And initially, it was such a shocking event, and I think people were just desensitized from the big media portrayal of it. So a lot of people I met and filmed and talked to that could get in a car in maybe Ohio, whatever, drive to New York City within a day, came to actually see this with their eyes, because it was just like it was something that many people told me that they did, and I basically dealt with my kind of trauma. I just filmed. I filmed for a year on the street. I mean, I was homeless for many months. I just filmed everything, and but people initially came to the street to look, to cry, to pray. And then religious zealots started coming in, like I got these young boys from the South handing out pamphlets and being like, this happened because God made this happen because those buildings represented evil. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, sports, money, da da da. I'm like, dude, you know who was in those buildings? Secretaries, clean, maintenance men. Like those buildings had a lot of vacancies, and like really working class people got killed. I mean, it's like, so you don't know what you're talking about. And and then Chinatown was choked off, so then people came to start selling stuff, and it became like, it was first like take a picture of it, then it was like looky-loos, take my picture in front of it, and then it just turned into like, it was like 4 or 5 weeks of, then it just was just like kind of desensitized and just a weird, thing to look at. But it was having that experience, I kind of needed, then the rest of the city came back to life,
Yeah.
it got normal. And, but it was not normal for me. And it was very hard for me to not be around other people that had like experiences. And like, I never came uptown. I was just like, why are these people just like partying and like nothing happened? Like my whole life, it was so fucked up. And so I felt most comfortable just being down there looking at the construction dudes. And a friend of mine was called in, initially they were using police lighting to light the pile, but they couldn't see anything. So then they called film companies, and my friend got this gig to like light that shit with his film trucks. Oh. And so he had passes, and he was like, hey guys, want to go down there? So actually got ESPO, me, ESPO, him, and a couple other people went, put on passes, and walked in there. And I was just like, he's like, don't take pictures. I'm like, dude, I'm going there to take pictures. Don't worry, I'll be cool. So, and I'm like thinking I'm all tough and tough, but I walked in there and I was just like the energy of just that space was like kind of make my breath go away. Actually, it was pretty daunting. And then there were firemen and stuff, and they were taking pictures of each other. So then I was like, take a picture then. So I banged out some pictures, but it was heavy. It was heavy.
Does the camera provide any shield, any barrier? Because there's like a, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah. I mean, from the second that first plane hit, we thought it was aviation accident. I had 2 floors in a building, third and second. My studio was the second on Maiden Lane, and I grabbed cameras, and I ran to the footprint, and I was like, holy shit, these people are coming out of the subway in the bottom of the building, and this building's on fire, and they have no idea. So I wanted to go back to my studio and get a 20 mil lens, my widest lens, and I ran back. Probably took me 1 minute, and then that's when the second plane hit. I mean, if I didn't want to get another lens, I could have. People got fucking killed on Fulton Street with flying debris, so cameras saved my life. But then I basically never stopped filming, and because I had this function, I had PTSD, but my husband had really bad PTSD, and I did not, because I was doing this thing. I was just like had a job. Like I felt like I had a backstage pass to like the biggest catastrophe in the United States in a century, because my driver's license said Maiden Lane, and I could get there. And I was just like, and after this week started going by, and there would be like an explosion, and a manhole cover would blow out of the ground, and fire was shooting out, and people are walking, like, because Giuliani was in 5 days opened up the stock exchange, because he was like, come to New York, shop, like, because he didn't want the economy to tank, and it was completely unsafe. And like where Battery Park City is, that's like organized middle class, people with families and money and stuff. And on the other side of Broadway were artists, senior citizens, and just rando buildings nobody knew, a lot of artists. And they were like, there's a burning pit of hell, but over here, come over here, because this is where the stock exchange was. So it was completely irresponsible. And then things like that would happen, and firemen would come. I remember one time, like, this giant manhole cover flew 30 feet in the air. Like, people are walking on this street.
Why did that happen? It was like gas
pipes
under
exploding,
something?
Gas explosions under the ground. And these firemen come, and I'm like, should I get out of here? He's like, I wouldn't stay here if I were you. And I'm like, what the fuck? Why is no one's telling us to leave? They were like, they didn't give a shit, because it was about money. And so I was like, I can get here. I need to document this stuff, and because, this term citizen journalism, I feel like that was my time and my obligation to show what the fuck was really going on,
How did you end up getting involved with the downtown New York art scene, the graffiti scene, all these graffiti writers that are legends in the graffiti world, and people look at them all over the globe, and you shot a lot of them during their earlier days. How did you get involved with all of them?
Well, I was sort of involved with Alleged Gallery, and Aaron was showing like a lot of skate artists that were skaters and graffiti writers, and I was doing this fashion story for Paper magazine, and it was about was called Revolutionaries, and I wanted a mask that was similar to the Sandinistas in this book that Susan Meiselas shot, and they look like fencing, like net masks with faces drawn on them. And I went to Aaron and I said, "Do you think Phil Frost would like paint one of these things for me?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'll ask him." So we traded. He painted these things for me. Oh, I used to have him here, and I did some photos for him. And so him and I became really great friends, and I learned all this graffiti stuff from him, and then through people that I met through him. Not everyone I met through him, but mostly, yeah. And I met Barry and Margaret, but we would go on walkabouts, and he's like, "Let's go up to, like 90 more up in Spanish Harlem, and there'd be this like Futura tag on like when the subway comes out of the ground that had been there forever, and we'd just go, like, he knew all this stuff, and so then my eye got like keen to it,
So
and like stuff that you would look, you walk by every day, and you're like, if you don't look, you don't see, right? But if you look, you see a lot.
yeah, definitely in the cities and the time period that you were shooting it more. Like
yeah, sometimes I'll look at old pictures and I'm like, I didn't even know that was in the picture.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. And then
So,
I'm like, oh, cool.
How was meeting all the Iraq dudes?
I guess, well, I met Dash when I was shooting. I was asked to shoot for a book, the install of Street Market. So it was Barry, ESPO. I knew ESPO very well, and Reese. And then Dash started buzzing around, and he was just like this magnetic wild child. And so we became friends, and then I guess I met the Iraq guys through him, actually, because I started at the time I was thinking, I was like, I'm going to start just doing interviews of these graffiti guys, and because I had known a lot of them at some point. I was just so fascinated by the culture, and like I'd travel to London, and I'd walk out of my hotel, and there'd be like an amaze tag on this, like behind this random hotel. I'm like, he was just here. I just love that like mark or that evidence of someone's presence, and just the messaging and all that. And I love the like the kind of camaraderie, or you could go to this town, and like I just didn't have that in my natural life, and I don't know if it was a girl thing, or I found that with skate too, like it just wasn't intrinsic to anything I came from, and I really thought that was amazing. And so the social dynamics of that community. So I just like to know about it. And so I started like doing these little interviews of graffiti guys, and just asking them random dumb questions, like average questions, like, that, which then became like kind of the thread of the Dash movie, which is him at 19 being like, do you want to have a house? Or, you think you'll have kids? Like just funny questions. But it was funny coming out of his mouth at the time in C Squad, drinking a gallon of vodka. But so yeah, I met those guys. And then like I had that big loft in the Financial, and who lived there? I think Nico stayed there for a while, and Seaman pretended I would come in, and he would be like, I think he was staying there, but like pretending like he wasn't staying there. And he would like, I'd come into my studio, and he'd like jump up, and he'd be like, oh, where's the vacuum cleaner? Like he had just popped by to vacuum the house or something. And I'm like, you can relax. So yeah, I kind of just knew him.
Such an iconic group. It's whenever I talk to people about them, everyone's everyone has their own version of how that group influenced them. and what that group did for them, and just people who maybe have never even met them or met anyone in that group, Iraq, have been deeply influenced by it and inspired in one way or the other, like myself included. Just through this thing, I've met a few of them, but even way before that, being a little kid and observing all of that amongst like all my other friends who are little kid graffiti writers at the time or whatever, like that was like the group that you would see. And that was actually how I became aware of you and your photos, was very firstly through that, like through that lens of graffiti, of seeing the photos of them. And the interesting thing was, it would be photos, not necessarily like action photos. You know what I mean? Of like, meaning like them bombing. It wasn't necessarily them taking tags. It would be a photo of that gives you an insight into some sort of personality, some sort of like real authentic energy that you're like tapping into through that photo. And I'm over here like this is something significant.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I think that maybe being a chick and maybe being older and not of it, I know that like Mark Gonzalez asked me to make a film with him backwards forwards in like 97 because I was not a skateboard filmmaker. I have a modern dance background, and I was looking at other things. I was looking at the beauty of the body when it falls, and in its skate, you're like, someone said to me, I can't believe you put so many falls in there. I'm like, I mean, look at how amazing he looks when he's falling, like, and that was like, you don't do that. I'm like, I don't know the rules, I don't know, and so maybe similar to graffiti, I'm just like looking at these little characters, these characters, these guys, and kind of looking at their style, their personalities, and like, yeah, I don't need to shoot them bombing. Other people are doing that,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really think about that. I was just doing what was interesting to me,
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's cool you said that. I like that, I remember, shooting, I think he just posted that. Snot, and he's just like wearing like Prada stuff, and he's like dancing on the street, and that's what our, a photographer and a subject, there's just like something that happens, and it's like your personalities come together, and you make a picture, and it's like you could have four people looking at the same thing, trying to shoot the same thing, and their pictures will be completely different because there's not a chemical reaction, but an energy reaction that happens, so that's what our energy reaction was, and that's what like how Dash was to me. That's probably would be different than some other guy or some other person. This is what I made, and so I know when that film was coming to be, there was like other people trying to make something. I'm like, good, make it. This is what I'm making. Nothing's going to be the same, and the more that we have, the better. Like the more his life lives on. But I like that. Anyway, that's a tangent, but I like that that resonated with you. That's really cool to me.
Yeah, no, it resonated pretty like immensely.
Well, like what was this magazine? I did a graffiti story for, it was like a art photo magazine, and I shot Kunle, those pictures of Kunle, and I shot Caleb C4 in San Francisco, who was really young at the time, teenager maybe, and he was up everywhere. He was wrecking it, and I knew him, and he came to me through Dave Schubert, who also I met as a teenager, and so he was like, yeah, he like connected me to him, and I actually introduced Dave to Dash, and they made tons of beautiful pictures together. So it's kind of cool that way.
It's amazing how I'm kind of just thinking about this right now, how you with your work, which is documentation, photography, and videos and films and stuff like that. People can see those and have pretty much no association or relation with that time and place. And it can influence the direction of their life, their personality, and like what they think is possible. Like I said, immensely, because that's kind of what it did for me. Seeing the media of graffiti that wasn't just the bombing tapped into some part where it's like, oh, for lack of a better phrase, like there's a different side of life. There's like a free, like untamed part of life, and I want that part of life. Like I want to experience true freedom.
Like you were seeing how these kids were living their lives in New York City.
Yeah.
Beyond just tagging the walls.
Yeah, and it just makes you want to experience true freedom, and it gives you it gives like a young person or a person who's watching this hope that like something more exists than just like, all right, you wake up and then you go to this and then everyone does the exact same thing and then like everyone's the same person. I'm like, wow,
that's what art is.
Yeah, like everyone's not the same person.
You know, produce inspiration, as my friend Kim said. You know, I mean, Iraq was very unique in as far as a crew, and they were of their time. They were completely, you know, diverse in culture and ethnicity and sexual preference, and they branded themselves, and they were like, I'm gonna get up as much as that Calvin Klein underwear I had on the corner of Broadway and Houston. Like, that's a spot we want, you know, and understood marketing, you know, because they were New York City kids. They were, you know, had artist parents. They were of this place, you know, and they understood, you know, how to get over it, how to get in it, how to play with it, how to, you know, whatever, have a good time.
Yeah.
And it was cool, you know, and that's cool, you or whoever not being here and getting a sense of that from just what you saw in magazines and films and whatever. That's awesome.
What was it like shooting for Moments Like This Never Last? What was it like actually filming it?
Filming Iraq, guys? Well, Dash was gone, and so a lot of it was editorial, and then it was hard because even though he had been gone for a number of years at that time, no one really got to... It was emotionally difficult for a lot of people, and I think soon after he passed, it was sort of like an understood, like, don't talk much, because the media was writing fucked up things, and, you know, like, they were journalists and just writing this perception of this person, even though they didn't know this person, and it was hurtful and not true. And so, like, within the circle, they were like, nobody talk. So nobody did talk. And then I come along with the camera years later, and I ask. And so it was emotional. You know, it was emotional for them. It was emotional for me. I mean, sometimes I'd be crying, you know. It was heavy, you know, and difficult. And there was some pushback, and I'm like, hey, man, you all know me forever. If you don't want to talk to me, that's cool. I don't need you to talk to me. But if you want to, I'm here, you know. So it worked out. It was long. It was hard. It was also hard to make a film about your, you know, a friend group you're connected to or your community. You know, mostly most of my work is a little bit more, I'm coming in, I'm like looking at something with fascination. I'm not so in it, you know? So you have to deal with a lot of, you know, the emotional dynamics of friendships, and, you know, it was sad. It was, you know, it was sad. It was, but when it came out, it was COVID, and it was at it premiered at Doc NYC, so it wasn't like a physical. People weren't going into a movie theater with strangers, and they were watching a link. It was snowy, sleety, shitty New York November, and a lot of people that participated and were nervous watched it in their living room with their friends or other friends that were in it, and on their couch, And I got a lot of calls the next day once it got released, and actually really kind of thanking me and saying like, I think it was actually perfect because this is how Dash was, you'd be like, go out all night, you'd like, come back to my place, and you'd drink wine and you'd stay up all night on his couch and draw and do whatever, So it was like being with him again in that intimate way, rather than being in a movie theater with people you didn't know and whatever. So it kind of worked out in a weird synchronicity way.
Yeah. Did you feel a lot of pressure?
Yeah. But I did not slack. It took me 10 years almost. Like if I look at the Word doc, when I started writing to try to find money and all that stuff, it was like 9 years. So I was like, I can say, of course it's flawed. Of course it's not, like you can always make things, I don't know. I just tried as hard as I could. This is what I made. And I know that I gave every inch of my self to getting that finished. So that's all if someone wants to criticize me, that's cool. Like that, a lot of people will say, oh my God, I know this great thing. You should make a documentary about it. And I'm like, no, you should make a documentary about that. You know what making a documentary about something entails? You don't, because, like, can you love something for 10 years? Can you, so, when someone wants to talk shit about someone that makes a documentary film, you're like, try it someday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it like when you were legitimately holding the video camera and asking these questions? What was on your mind when you were doing that? And what was that? Yeah, what was that like? Did you know it was for maybe one day a documentary? Did you know it was for one day something? What did
Of
you
Dash?
think? Yeah.
Oh no, I think it just went back to like, capture your artist friends, particularly when they're young, before the business of art takes hold and their creativity is pure and naive and exciting. They're excited. There's something so special and like fleeting about this moment, and I always tried to get that, and that was my thought when I was shooting him. Really, I mean, not in a million years at that time would I think he'd be gone. I mean, he lived life hard, but you don't think about that. I did.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know I guess if you're shooting someone that is gonna die, you're thinking about. But I have photographed some people that are gonna die, and a friend, the editor on my lovely friend Gabriel Rye, he was the editor on Dash, and he passed. He died in his 40s, cancer, and I did I did pictures of him with his baby, and I definitely was thinking about capturing a moment for his child actually to have when he gets old, like this beautiful moment of love,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of meaning that is behind your work. And I think that people feel that even who are maybe completely unaware of photography as a thing or videography as a thing or the scene as a thing, just seeing it, I feel like they feel that meaning. And it just comes from the source of how much you're actually putting into it and how much you actually live it. And I'm saying that just from, like I said, my experience. Like I'm not a photographer, and photography wasn't one of my interests growing up. Not like primarily. Same thing with video, same thing with this, same thing with that. Like I've never really thought about any of that, but when I would see your stuff, I would feel some sort of impact, and I'm like, wow, this is significant, and I like this.
Oh, that's cool. Well, I always kind of like I like this word, participatory photography. Like, I'm at the dance party. I'm dancing. The camera is dancing with whoever I'm like, and maybe, I'll use wide lenses. I'm not putting this thing up to my face. I'm like, I know what I'm getting because I'm doing it all the time and I know what it does, So, like, so I'm a participant. I'm not an observer. Sometimes I'm an observer, but mostly I'm a participant. That's the way I like to work.
Yeah.
And yeah, you make a lot of fucked up pictures, but you might come up with one amazing one. Yeah. It's yeah. Yeah.
You've spoken about the business of art. And then on the other side, I think you said, I'm trying to quote it, but I might mess it up. It was like the innate need for a human to create, something like that. How are those two different?
Massively different. Well, like, there's the artists that you know about and the artists that you don't know about has nothing to do with how good that artist is. It's like there's people that spend a lot of time like promoting themselves, and there's artists that just, they make art because it's their only way to communicate, and they're like introverts and whatever, and unless someone doesn't promote them, maybe you don't know them, and but it has nothing to do with how good of an artist it is. But there's many aspects to what is business. Business is selling something, right? And that's not the basis of what art is. It's not about selling shit. It's about making something. So, but as we started out, your rent is not $50 like in the 70s. Your rent is thousands and thousands of dollars to live in this place. And so how are you going to survive? Like, I grapple with that every single day. Like, I want to be with my community. I like so happy when I go. I just was in a show at Deitch on Saturday and then went to this after party in this room with like, so many friends and community and, that were still here. And, it's just like, oh my God, I love that so much, because a lot of people come and go, and, but it's, it's hard, and I went and listening to your podcast, it was kind of comforting to know other people have some of the similar challenges. Like, I just, and talking about that, I gotta, maybe I can't walk around the block because I gotta go make something that I can sell, to like keep living here, and, but then also, I never had a rent stabilized apartment. I always really gave a shit about like having a nice apartment, not nice, but like space. And it was always too much for me. And I'd like have someone sleep up in a corner loft and pretend they weren't there and stuff. But because I could always barely afford my rent, it made me really hustle. And maybe that's why I have a body of work could never be lazy, because I never had $250 rent, and I know people that had $250 rent and they have no body of work because they didn't have to. And that's not everybody's case. Like, I think I would still have a body of work if I had $250 rent. Yeah. $250 rent. But yeah, but it gets it's exhausting,
Yeah, what keeps you going? What keeps you still shooting photos and still super into it and still in love with what you do?
Oh my God, I have so many stories I want to tell, And I think about like having this year, particularly going into my archive, and like when 9/11 happened, I had a lot of people. It was a 20-year anniversary, like 4 years ago now, right? Or 3 years ago, and a lot of entities licensed that footage. I already had it very organized because I used a lot of it in the Dash movie and other things. But there's a part of that kind of sucked into that archive is the blackout of 2003. It's on the wall. 2003, August 15th, 2003, blackout. And that was like one of the best New York nights of all time, and for many of the reasons, because it was close to 9/11, and people were like, are we gonna wreck shit or are we gonna party, and like people just wanted to have fun and not get gnarly, and I just had, this is me and Jake Phelps. I got this camera and kind of shitty mic, and and that's when I shot all this 9/11, and like HBO, all these people licensed that footage, and I was like, I didn't have any money, I just did shit, and so now I'm trying to get this feature film finance or find money for a feature film about Creative Growth Art Center. It's about art and disability, and I was like, this is gonna be a no-brainer. Find money easy. In the last 2 years, it's been really tough, and I was like, okay, how did I used to do shit? Just me, my camera, mic on camera, like, fuck it, like, work with what I have. I've had big budgets, I've had no budgets, like, all right, but I know I got myself. I know how to wear every hat. I don't want to wear every hat. I know how to. Maybe the quality is not going to be the greatest thing ever, but it's about the story, So, like, I just remind myself that, like, just, I got these stories to tell. I'm going to tell them. Like, when things are like, people say no to you and no, you didn't get that grant, or I'm just like, oh yeah, okay, watch me. Like, it gives me fire, actually, when I'm told no, or when I have no resources. Like, I know how to do it. I've done it. So it's not ideal, but
So it's wanting to tell more stories and wanting to produce that work that keeps you going.
Yeah, and sometimes, like, I hope someday I don't shoot something for 20. Like, I wish I want to make shorter things, or like, but like this project that I'm trying to kind of wrap up. I've been shooting at this place for 20 years, and and I feel an obligation. People have given me their time. People have told me, open up to me on camera. I don't take that lightly. That's like, that has value, and that is something not to be taken advantage of. So if I've gone down the road with something, I'm not going to quit, like, I have to see it through. I feel.
On another topic, how do you feel about the fact that now everyone has access to a camera via the phone? All good. Everyone has access to the camera via the phone, and because of that, naturally, people are shooting more photos just with their phones. But also, photos are kind of, perhaps, in that world, less appreciated because there's an infinite. They're just infinite. Whereas, let's say on a roll you have 36 or whatever it is that you have. How does that change the art of photography?
Sometimes that everyone can do it. How does that change? I mean, everyone could write with a pen, like, what are you writing? Like, sometimes I feel like all this knowledge I have, I know, I've been doing this my whole life, right? My whole adult life. And I know, like, not everything, but like a very deep reservoir of knowledge about the photographic process, and from shooting, everything about cameras and darkroom and everything else. And you're like, does that mean anything anymore? And you're like, everyone could go like this. And I think that, because you get, sometimes you gauge what is your value? Is your value because someone hired you to do an Adidas commercial, or because someone bought your picture in a gallery? Like, what is your value? How do you measure your value? And I have to check myself, to be like, oh, maybe I just did all this stuff and someone hired me to do this stuff, or maybe I had this art show, but like, I don't want that to be my value. I want my value to be more personal and something that inspires me, and something that what really makes me feel good about my value is when I get a random message on Instagram from a kid in some country, whatever, that saw something I made, and like you said, inspired that person to make something, to go to a city didn't live in. I've had young people that are not young anymore, that have come and looked me up in New York City, and I've had coffee and told me that something I made or something I said, or they reached out to me 20 years ago and I said something to them, it changed their lives. And they went and they pursued a dream that they were scared to do. And to me, that's the ultimate. Even if it's one fucking kid, but it's been many more than one kid. And to me, that's like the greatest thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. I think that it can be easy to be like, oh, my value comes from I shop for Adidas, I shop for Nike, I shop for Fred Perry, I shop for whoever. And that's a talking point, and that's like a Instagram bullet point of like, oh, I did this. You see that I did this. And I think what you just said, now more than ever, is important, because it brings meaning to what you do besides just like the report card, if that makes any sense. There's like a report card because there's like likes and there's shares and there's things that are visible, that are quantifiable by number, but those types of things you're saying are not really quantifiable by number, and they don't have to be. And then, I think just on a human level holds a lot of meaning. Like inspiring someone to be alive and be happy and give them purpose, that holds a lot of meaning.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I showed everybody Street in Russia, and I was part of some exchange thing that was through the State Department. They used to do things like that. No more. And it was about like inviting films to a country and having an exchange through art and not politics. And they were like, where do you want to go? And I'm like, war-torn countries, anywhere I haven't been to before. So I got to go to Russia. It was before now, but where else did I go? Turkey. But right before I went to Russia, I got all these emails from people in Russia going like, oh, about my film. And I'm like, oh, fuck, it's been bootlegged. And then I found out, yeah, I was bootlegged on YouTube in Russia. And I'm like, no one's going to come to this film. So I go there and actually made more people come to the film. And this kid comes up to me and he's got this skateboard picture album, and he's a teenager, and he's like comes up and he's like, I saw your movie like 20 times, and you're like, and here's this Russian kid, and we're supposed to hate these people, and he's just a boy, just like all the boys in America, and he wants to have fun, he wants to skate, he wants to share pictures and his life. And it's just like, politics is one thing, people are another thing. And so that's why art is so important, because it's not about politics. It's about human emotion, and it makes people feel things, and it makes people feel the similarities between all of us and how connected we are, because we have these same emotions. So like without that, we're doomed, man.